The rain fell in violent sheets across the stone courtyard of Valsera, turning the iridescent blue pavements into treacherous mirrors that reflected the angry purple sky. Tessa reared and watched from beneath the shelter of a nearby archway, her mechanic's jumpsuit soaked through despite her attempt to stay dry. She hadn't planned on stopping on this backwater planet, just a quick repair job while her freighter captain negotiated cargo rates. But the storm had grounded all flights, and now she found herself witness to what appeared to be some kind of ritual combat. The crowd of blue-skinned Valserans formed a tight circle around two combatants, their silver-streaked hair gleaming despite the gloom. Their musical language rose and fell like waves, incomprehensible to Tessa despite her translator implant's valiant efforts. "Outsider," a gravelly voice spoke beside her. "You should not linger here. This is house business." Tessa glanced down at the wizened alien elder, noting the elaborate gold markings that adorned his azure skin. "Just waiting out the storm. My ship needs another hour before she's space-worthy again." The elder's eyes, solid amber orbs without pupil or iris, narrowed. "Then wait elsewhere. What happens here is not for foreign eyes." But Tessa's attention had already shifted back to the duel. One fighter, clearly female by human standards, moved with exceptional grace despite her obvious exhaustion. Her opponent, a male nearly twice her size, pressed his advantage relentlessly. The female warrior's silver-streaked hair, longer than any Tessa had seen among the locals, whipped around her as she parried a vicious strike. "Who are they?" Tessa asked, ignoring the elder's warning. The elder sighed. "The female is Nixari Val Soros, last daughter of a once great house. The male is Zethron Val Karas, champion of the Ascendant House. He fights to claim her family's ancestral lands. And if she wins..." "She will not win," the elder stated flatly. "Her house has fallen too far. This is merely formality." As if to punctuate his words, Zethron landed a punishing blow that sent Nixari sprawling across the wet stone. Her tight cobalt combat suit, accented with intricate gold embroidery that hugged her slender form, was now torn in several places, revealing deep cuts that leaked violet blood. The crowd roared its approval as Zethron circled his fallen opponent. Nixari struggled to rise, one hand still clutching her house blade, a magnificent weapon with elaborate engravings that seemed to pulse with an inner light despite the gloom. "Yield, daughter of nothing," Zethron's voice boomed across the arena. "Your father's blade deserves a stronger hand." "I will die before I yield my family's honor," Nixari spat, though her voice trembled with pain. Something about her defiance struck a chord in Tessa. She'd seen too many underdogs crushed by those with power. It was the story of half the planets in this sector. Before she could think better of it, she was moving, pushing through the crowd. Zethron raised his blade for a killing blow. "No. Stop." Nixari cried out, but not at her opponent. At Tessa. Too late. As Zethron's blade descended, Tessa snatched up Nixari's fallen sword from beside her and intercepted the strike with a resounding clash of metal. The impact jarred her arm to the shoulder, but she held firm, her muscular frame absorbing the shock. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Zethron stepped back, his four eyes widening in shock. "This isn't your fight, human," he snarled. "Seems unfair to kill someone who's already down," Tessa replied, adjusting her grip on the sword. It felt strangely warm in her hand, almost alive. "You fool," Nixari whispered, her voice a mix of horror and disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Before Tessa could respond, the elder she'd spoken to earlier pushed through the crowd, followed by several others in elaborate ceremonial robes. They stared at Tessa with expressions ranging from shock to outrage to, most disturbingly, amusement. "The blade has been claimed," the elder announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent arena. "By ancient law, unbroken since the first dawn, one who wields the house blade in defense of its bearer becomes bound to that bearer in the sacred bond of union." Tessa blinked. What now?" "You have claimed the right to be Nixari Val Soros's life mate," the elder continued implacably. The duel is suspended. The rite of bonding must now commence. Tessa looked down at Nixari, who was staring at her with an expression that suggested she couldn't decide whether to thank her or stab her with the very blade Tessa had just used to save her. "I was just trying to help," she said weakly. "Help?" Nixari hissed, struggling to her feet. "You've just bound yourself to a dying house on a planet you know nothing about. The blade chooses, human, and it has chosen you. There is no escape from this for either of us." As the implication sank in, Tessa felt the weight of 100 alien eyes upon her. She'd faced down pirates, corporate assassins, and hostile wildlife on a dozen worlds, but nothing had prepared her for this. She'd come to this planet for a simple repair job and somehow ended up engaged to a woman she'd never even spoken to. "Well," she said finally, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "this is going to make for one hell of a story. If I live long enough to tell it." "You can't seriously expect me to go through with this," Tessa muttered as she followed Nixari through the winding corridors of what she had tersely explained was her house's ancestral stronghold, a massive structure carved directly into the face of a mountain. Despite her injuries, Nixari moved with determined grace, though Tessa noticed how she occasionally steadied herself against the wall. The violet blood from her wounds had dried to a dark crust against her blue skin. "What I expect is irrelevant," she replied without turning. "The blade chose you. That is all that matters. A sword can't choose anything. It's an inanimate object." This made Nixari stop and turn, her silver-streaked hair swinging like a curtain. Up close, Tessa could see that her eyes weren't entirely amber as she'd first thought, tiny flecks of gold danced within them like distant stars. "The Soros blade has been forged in the blood of my ancestors for 16 generations, she said, her voice low and intense. "It carries the essence of our lineage. When you grasped it in defense of my life, it recognized something in you worthy of continuing our line." Tessa ran a hand through her short auburn hair. "Look, where I come from, marriage requires at least a first date. Maybe dinner. Definitely mutual consent. Where you come from is irrelevant now," Nixari cut her off. "You're here, and you have invoked ancient law. My house stands on the brink of extinction, our territories being seized, our people scattered. That duel was my last chance to preserve what little remains of our honor, and now—" A complex emotion flickered across her face. "Now we have possibilities. Unexpected ones." Before Tessa could press further, they arrived at a set of massive doors inlaid with gold patterns that seemed to shift subtly in the dim light. Two guards stood at attention, their expressions hardening at the sight of Tessa. "The elders await," one said, not bothering to hide his contempt. The chamber beyond was circular, with a domed ceiling that revealed the stormy sky through sections of transparent crystal. 7 elderly Volsarans sat in a semicircle, their elaborate robes and gold facial markings denoting their status. The central figure, a female with hair so long it pooled on the floor around her, raised a gnarled hand as they entered. "Approach, daughter of Soros. Bring your chosen." Nixari straightened despite her injuries and walked forward with dignity. Tessa followed, acutely aware of how out of place her weather-beaten jumpsuit looked in this formal setting. "High Elder," Nixari bowed. "I present Tessa Reardon of Earth, a human." The High Elder's voice dripped with disdain. "You bring a human before the sacred circle and claim her as life mate?" "I claim nothing," Nixari responded. "The blade chose." Murmurs rippled through the assembled elders. One male with particularly elaborate gold facial markings leaned forward. "This is unprecedented. No outsider has ever wielded a house blade." "Perhaps because no outsider has ever been foolish enough to interfere in house matters," another elder snapped. The High Elder raised her hand for silence. "The law is absolute. If the blade accepted her touch in your defense, then the bond is formed. However—" Her gaze shifted to Tessa. "The question remains whether this human understands what she has committed herself to." With all due respect, Tessa stepped forward, "I don't. I saw someone about to be killed, and I acted. Where I come from, that's just basic decency. Decency, the High Elder repeated the word as if tasting something unfamiliar. An interesting concept, yet irrelevant. The blade does not recognize decency. It recognizes strength, honor, and bloodline compatibility. Bloodline compatibility? Tessa frowned. You mean? Yes, human. The blade would not have accepted your touch if your genetic structure was incompatible with continuing the Soros line. This is unexpected. A commotion at the chamber entrance interrupted them. Zethron strode in, flanked by his own entourage, his massive frame seeming to fill the room with menace. This farce has gone on long enough, he boomed. The human interfered in sacred combat. The duel was not concluded. The duel became irrelevant the moment she claimed the blade, the High Elder responded coolly. Zethron's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. I challenge the validity of this bond. The human knows nothing of our ways. She cannot possibly fulfill the duties of a house partner. That, the High Elder acknowledged, is a legitimate concern. Nixari stepped forward. By law, she has 1 full cycle of our moons to prove her worthiness. During this time, she is under house protection. A cycle? Zethron laughed harshly. I'll need far less time than that to prove her unworthy. He turned his gaze to Tessa. Human, do you even know what duties you have claimed? You must defend house territories, participate in council, continue the bloodline. Whoa, let's pump the brakes on that last part, Tessa interrupted, earning confused looks from everyone but Nixari, whose translator apparently understood the idiom. The human will be instructed in her duties, Nixari stated firmly. And I will vouch for her capacity to learn. Bold words from the daughter of a fallen house, Zethron sneered. Very well. 1 cycle. Then we shall see if your human pet can stand as a true house partner, or if she will flee back to the stars where she belongs. After Zethron stormed out, the High Elder fixed Tessa with a penetrating stare. You have much to learn in very little time, human. Your actions have consequences beyond what you can imagine. Story of my life, Tessa muttered. Later, as Nixari led her to what would apparently be her quarters, Tessa finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why didn't you just let me leave? You could have told them I didn't know what I was doing. Nixari stopped, her expression unreadable in the dim corridor. Because the moment you wielded that blade, you became my house's last hope. Without you, Zethron would have killed me today, and the Soros line would have ended. With you, she hesitated, with you, there is a chance. A small one, but more than I had this morning. A chance for what, exactly? Her gaze met Tessa's, fierce and unyielding. A chance to rebuild. To reclaim what was stolen from us. To ensure that my family's sacrifices were not in vain. She stepped closer, close enough that Tessa could smell the unfamiliar spice of her skin. You may not have chosen this, Tessa Reardon, but neither did I. We are bound now by blood and honor. The only question is whether you will run from that bond, or embrace it. With that, she turned and continued down the corridor, leaving Tessa to wonder just what kind of storm she'd walked into, and whether she had any hope of navigating her way through it. Again. Nixari commanded, her voice echoing through the training chamber. Tessa exhaled slowly, raising the practice sword, a weighted replica of the house blade that now rested in a ceremonial chamber. Her muscles burned from 3 hours of continuous drills. Your stance is still wrong, Nixari circled her critically. Lower your center, bend your knees more. On Earth, we have this concept called taking a break, Tessa grunted, but adjusted her position nonetheless. 5 days had passed since the fateful duel. 5 days of intensive cultural and combat training that left Tessa exhausted. The lunar cycle Nixari had mentioned translated to roughly 28 Earth days, meaning she had just over 3 weeks left to become proficient in skills the Volsarans spent lifetimes mastering. Breaks are for those who can afford them, Nixari replied, though she moved to a nearby bench and sat, wincing slightly. Her wounds were healing, but not as quickly as she pretended. Tessa lowered the practice sword. You should be resting too. Those cuts were deep. My physical condition is irrelevant compared to the task at hand, which is turning you into a proper house partner in record time. You mean housewife, Tessa said, joining her on the bench. Let's call it what it is. For a moment, Nixari looked genuinely confused. Wife. This word, it implies ownership, does it not? A diminished status? Not in my culture. It's supposed to be about partnership, equality. Tessa studied the alien woman's profile. What exactly does being a house partner mean in your society? Nixari was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes distant. In the traditional sense, a house partner shares in all aspects of governance, military command, and territorial management. They are expected to be warrior, diplomat, and leader. Gender is irrelevant to these roles. That's surprisingly progressive. Progressive? Nixari's head tilted, a gesture Tessa was learning indicated confusion. It is simply practical. Strong houses require strong leadership from all partners. Weakness in any member threatens the whole. Tessa absorbed this. Tell me about your father. The change in Nixari's expression was immediate, a softening that transformed her austere features into something achingly vulnerable. Theron Val Soros was the finest strategist of his generation. He led our house through the border wars and established alliances that kept us strong for decades. Her fingers traced an invisible pattern on the bench. But strength invites challenge. The Kara's house had always envied our territories, especially the crystal mines in the northern reaches. What happened? Poison, she said flatly. Not honorable combat, not a formal challenge. Just poison in his evening meal. By the time I returned from my military service, he was gone, and our house was in disarray. Zethron's father had already seized 2 of our outlying territories. Tessa felt a surge of protective anger. And no one did anything. There must be some kind of planetary law. Law. Nixari's laugh was bitter. The law is simple, the strong survive, the weak perish. Without my father's leadership, we were seen as weak. One by one, our allies abandoned us. So you challenged Zethron to regain what was lost. She nodded. It was not my wisest decision, but it was the only option remaining. A desperate gamble that nearly cost me everything. Her gaze met Tessa's. Until you changed the game entirely. A young messenger entered, her silver-streaked hair cropped short in the style of house servants. Honored Nixari, the Council of Elders requests your presence, and that of your bondmate. Nixari stood abruptly. Now. The council wasn't scheduled to convene for another 8 days. House Karas called for an emergency session. All houses must attend. After the messenger departed, Tessa raised an eyebrow. I'm guessing this isn't good news. It's Zethron's first move, Nixari confirmed, already moving toward formal attire. He's forcing a public evaluation before you're ready. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater carved from dark stone, its walls lined with alcoves containing the busts of ancient house leaders. 3 massive banners hung from the vaulted ceiling, the gold phoenix of Soros, now faded and tattered, the crimson claw of Karas, bright and dominant, and the blue spiral of Thau, the most neutral of the 3 major houses. Hundreds of Volsurans filled the tiered seating. Tessa, dressed in formal Soros attire that felt like an elaborate costume, felt like an exhibit in an alien zoo. Remember, Nixari whispered as they descended toward the central platform, speak only when directly addressed, maintain eye contact to show respect, and keep my hands visible at all times to show I'm not reaching for a weapon, Tessa finished. I was paying attention during the etiquette lessons. At the center of the chamber, elevated on a circular platform, sat the heads of the 3 major houses. Zethron represented Karas, his massive frame draped in ceremonial armor. Beside him, a serene-looking female represented House Thau. And for House Soros. Where's your representative? Tessa whispered. You're looking at her, Nixari replied tightly. With my father gone, I am the last of our bloodline old enough to sit on the council. The High Elder stood and raised her hands for silence. The Council of Three Houses is convened at the request of House Karas. Who speaks for the petitioners? Zethron rose, his 4 eyes settling on Tessa with contempt. I, Zethron Val Karas, speak for my house and for all who value our ancient traditions. 5 days ago, an outsider interfered in sacred combat and claimed the house blade through ignorance rather than right. Now we are asked to accept this human as a house partner. He spat the word human like a curse. The law is clear, Nixari countered, her voice strong despite being outnumbered. The blade accepted her. The bond is formed. House Soros acknowledges Tessa Reardon as my rightful partner and a member of our house. A blade cannot choose an outsider who knows nothing of our ways. Zethron slammed his fist on the council table. This human cannot even speak our ancient tongue. The Thal representative raised a slender hand. Perhaps we should hear from the human herself. All eyes turned to Tessa. She straightened her shoulders, keenly aware that her next words could either strengthen or destroy Nixari's position. Members of the council, she began carefully, I won't pretend to understand all your customs or history. Where I come from, we don't have house blades or ritual combat. But we do understand honor, loyalty, and keeping our word. She paused, meeting Zethron's hostile gaze. I didn't know what I was agreeing to when I picked up that sword, but I'm not in the habit of walking away from my commitments, even accidental ones. Fine words, Zethron sneered, but words alone prove nothing. If you truly wish to honor our ways, then prove your worth through action, not empty promises. What do you propose? The High Elder asked. Zethron's lips curved in a predatory smile. The trial of 3 paths, traditional, binding, and perfectly suited to test an outsider's worthiness. Nixari stiffened. That trial hasn't been invoked in 7 generations. Perhaps because it hasn't been necessary until now, Zethron countered. Unless your human bondmate wishes to concede her inadequacy now. Tessa felt Nixari's hand close around her wrist in warning, but she'd already had enough of Zethron's posturing. I accept, she said firmly. The chamber erupted in surprised exclamations. Nixari's fingers dug painfully into her arm. You don't know what you've just agreed to, she hissed. Then I guess you'll have to explain it to me, Tessa whispered back, because I'm not backing down from this bully. The High Elder raised her hands for silence. It is decided. The trial of 3 paths will commence at dawn tomorrow. The human Tessa Reardon will face tests of body, mind, and spirit. Should she fail any challenge, the bond will be dissolved, and House Soros will forfeit all remaining territories to House Karas. What? Tessa turned to Nixari in alarm. I tried to warn you, she muttered, her expression grim. As the council adjourned, Zethron approached them. Enjoy your last night as a house partner, human. Tomorrow you will learn the true meaning of Valsyrian strength. Back in Nixari's chambers, she explained the challenges: physical combat against a champion of Zethron's choosing, a mental test of strategy and knowledge of Valsyrian history and law, and a spiritual journey through the ancestral memories stored within the house blade itself. And I have to do all 3 of these things tomorrow? Yes. And you must succeed at all 3, or everything is lost. Her voice softened. I should have explained this before. I was trying to protect you from the full weight of what you've stumbled into. For the first time, Tessa saw genuine vulnerability in Nixari's expression. On impulse, she reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cooler than a human's, but soft, and she didn't pull away. I may not know much about your world, Tessa said quietly, but I'm a quick learner. And I'm not going to let Zethron win without one hell of a fight. Something shifted in Nixari's gaze, surprise, perhaps, or the first glimmer of genuine respect. Then we have much to prepare in very little time. They worked through the night, Nixari drilling Tessa on Valsyrian history, combat techniques, and the complex web of house politics. As the hours passed, Tessa found herself increasingly aware of her companion's presence, the way Nixari's eyes lit up when discussing strategy, the graceful efficiency of her movements even when tired, the musical quality of her voice when she spoke in her native tongue. "Your people," Tessa said during a brief respite, "they seem to value strength above all else." Strength, yes, but not merely physical power. Intelligence, adaptability, the ability to forge alliances, these are also forms of strength. Nixari's gaze grew thoughtful. "Perhaps that is why the blade chose you. You demonstrated all of these qualities in a single moment. I just saw someone in trouble and reacted." "Exactly." Nixari leaned closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Do you know how rare that is? How many beings would risk their own safety for a complete stranger? Most would have calculated the odds, considered the consequences, and walked away." The space between them seemed to shrink. Tessa found herself studying the subtle patterns of gold in Nixari's eyes, the elegant curve of her neck, the way her hair caught the light. "I'm not most people," Tessa said softly. "No," Nixari agreed, her hand moving to rest over Tessa's heart. "You are not." For a moment, the weight of their circumstances faded. There was only the quiet of the chamber, the warmth of touch, and the growing awareness that what had begun as an accidental binding was becoming something far more complex. Then the warning bells of dawn sounded across the stronghold, and reality crashed back. "The trial," Nixari whispered, pulling away. "Right." Tessa stood, trying to shake off the spell of the moment. "Time to prove I'm worthy of all this." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Nixari caught her arm. "Tessa, before you go, whatever happens today, know that you have given me something I thought lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope." The word was spoken so quietly Tessa almost missed it. But the look in Nixari's eyes, vulnerable and fierce all at once, would be burned into her memory forever. Outside, the storm had finally broken, and the first rays of alien sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It felt like an omen, though whether good or ill, only the trials ahead would reveal. Dawn broke over the mountain fortress, painting the dark stone with streaks of amber and rose. In the ancient arena where Tessa had first seen Nixari fight, hundreds of Volsarans gathered to witness the trial of three paths. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. No outsider had ever undertaken the trials, and most spectators clearly expected to witness a humiliating failure. Tessa stood at the edge of the combat circle, dressed in modified Soros battle attire. The traditional armor had been adjusted to fit her broader human frame, the deep blue fabric emblazoned with gold clan markings. Beside her, Nixari made final adjustments to her bracers. "Remember what we practiced," she said quietly. "Valkyrian warriors rely on speed and precision. They'll expect you to fight like a human, all brute force and no finesse." "So I surprised them," Tessa replied, flexing her fingers around the practice sword's hilt. Despite her confident words, her mouth was dry. One night of intensive training couldn't possibly prepare her for what was coming. Nixari's fingers lingered on her arm. "You don't have to do this. We could still find another way." "There is no other way, and you know it," Tessa said gently. "Besides, I've survived worse odds." Nixari's expression suggested she doubted that, but she nodded. "Then may the ancestors guide your blade." A horn sounded, signaling the beginning of the trial. Zethron approached from across the arena, followed by a Valkyrian female nearly as tall as himself, clad in crimson battle armor. For the first challenge, Zethron announced to the assembly, "I present Kira Th Val Karas, second blade of House Karas and undefeated in 19 ritual combats." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tessa glanced at Nixari, whose expression had tightened considerably. "He's chosen their best close combat specialist," she whispered. "Kira Th is known for her technique, she prefers to exhaust opponents rather than overpower them." "Great," Tessa muttered. "Death by 1,000 cuts." The High Elder stepped forward. The rules of combat are simple, the challenge ends when one combatant yields or is rendered unconscious. Lethal force is forbidden. She fixed Kira Th with a stern gaze at this last point. Tessa stepped into the circle, facing her opponent. Kira Th was built like a dancer, tall, lean, with the coiled tension of a predator. Her silver-streaked hair was bound in intricate braids, and her amber eyes held an almost serene confidence. "I've never fought a human before," Kira Th said, her voice surprisingly warm. "I confess curiosity about your capabilities." "Hope I don't disappoint," Tessa replied, settling into the stance Nixari had drilled into her through the night. The horn sounded again, and Kira Th attacked with fluid grace. Her blade seemed to dance through the air, each strike flowing seamlessly into the next. Tessa found herself immediately on the defensive, parrying desperately as the Valkyrian warrior pressed her advantage. Unlike Zethron's brutal power, Kira Th fought with surgical precision. Each strike was calculated to gradually wear down Tessa's defenses. Within minutes, Tessa had acquired a dozen small cuts, none serious individually but collectively sapping her strength. "Impressive endurance," Kira Th noted conversationally as she landed another shallow cut across Tessa's forearm. "But technique will always triumph over raw determination." Tessa circled warily, reassessing her opponent. Nixari had been right, trying to match a Valkyrian in speed and precision was suicide. She needed to change the game entirely. The next time Kira Th launched her flowing combination, Tessa did something unexpected. Instead of retreating, she stepped directly into the attack, accepting a painful slice across her ribs in exchange for getting inside the Valkyrian's guard. Before Kira Th could adjust, Tessa grabbed her sword arm and used her superior weight to drive them both to the ground. Valkyrian combat was elegant and refined, it wasn't designed for the kind of rough-and-tumble brawling Tessa had learned in spacer bars across the galaxy. They rolled across the stone, grappling for advantage. Kira Th was stronger than she looked, but Tessa had experience fighting in zero-G and hostile environments. She managed to pin the Valkyrian's sword arm and pressed her practice blade to her opponent's throat. "Yield," Tessa panted. Kira Th's eyes widened in shock, then crinkled with what might have been amusement. "I yield," she said clearly. Stunned silence fell over the arena, followed by scattered applause. Tessa helped Kira Th to her feet, noting the respect in the warrior's gaze. "Unconventional," Kira Th said quietly, "but effective. Your bond-mate has chosen well." The second challenge took place in the Hall of Memory, a circular chamber lined with crystalline panels that glowed with soft light. Ancient texts and star charts covered every available surface, and the air hummed with the energy of stored knowledge. "The test of mind," the High Elder announced, "will examine your understanding of Valkyrian law, history, and strategic thinking. You will face 3 scenarios, each requiring both knowledge and wisdom to resolve." Tessa nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. The night's cramming session had given her a basic understanding of Valkyrian culture, but hardly enough to pass a comprehensive examination. The first scenario was projected into the crystals around her, a trade dispute between 2 minor houses over mining rights. Tessa drew on her experience as a spacer, applying principles of negotiation and compromise she'd learned in dozens of similar situations. To her surprise, her practical approach seemed to impress the evaluating elders. The second scenario involved military strategy during the border wars. Here, Nixari's lessons proved invaluable. Tessa outlined a defensive strategy that focused on mobility and alliance building rather than direct confrontation. The third scenario was the most challenging, a complex web of marriage alliances and territorial disputes that had apparently shaped Valkyrian politics for generations. Tessa stared at the projection, her mind racing. The solution wasn't in the history books, it was in understanding the underlying motivations and power dynamics. "The root of this conflict," she said finally, "isn't territorial or even political. It's cultural. The younger houses are challenging the traditional hierarchy, but they're being forced to use the old system's methods. What if instead of fighting over the existing structure, they created a new one that addressed everyone's needs. The elders exchanged glances. One of them, a female with intricate facial tattoos, leaned forward. Elaborate. Establish a council of equals, Tessa continued, warming to her theme. Each house contributes according to their strengths, military, economic, technological. Resources are shared based on need, not historical claims. It's not perfect, but it's sustainable. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Then the High Elder nodded slowly. Your perspective is unorthodox. But not without merit. You passed the second trial. The third challenge would take place at sunset, in the chamber where the Soros blade rested. As the day waned, Tessa found herself increasingly nervous. The first two trials had been difficult but comprehensible. This final test was something entirely outside her experience. What exactly happens during the spiritual trial? She asked Nixari as they walked through the fortress corridors. The blade will connect you to the ancestral memories of House Soros, Nixari explained. You will experience fragments of our history, our triumphs and failures. The trial is to remain yourself throughout the experience. Many who attempt it become lost in the memories and never return. That's comforting, Tessa muttered. And if I do get lost? Nixari's expression was grim. Then you die, and the blade chooses another. But Tessa. She stopped walking and turned to face her. There's something else. Something I haven't told you. What? When you touch the blade for the spiritual trial, you won't just experience our ancestors' memories. You'll experience mine as well. My thoughts, my feelings, my... She hesitated. My reasons for hoping you succeed. The implication hung in the air between them. Tessa felt her pulse quicken. Nixari. I know this bond began as an accident, Nixari said quietly. I know neither of us chose it. But something has changed for me these past days. When I look at you, I see not just my house's salvation, but... She trailed off, unable to finish. But what? Someone I could genuinely care for. Someone I could love, if given the chance. The words hit Tessa like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on the immediate challenges, on surviving each day, that she'd barely allowed herself to acknowledge the growing attraction between them. But now, faced with Nixari's quiet confession, she couldn't deny her own feelings. I'm scared, Tessa admitted. Not of the trial, but of what happens after. If I survive this, if I become a true member of your house, what then? Do we pretend this is just a political arrangement? Nixari stepped closer, close enough that Tessa could feel the warmth of her breath. That choice is yours. I cannot force your feelings any more than I could force the blade to choose you. But know this, whatever you decide, I will respect it. Before Tessa could respond, the sunset horn sounded across the fortress. It was time for the final trial. The chamber of the blade was small and intimate, lit only by the soft glow emanating from the weapon itself. The Soros blade rested on an altar of polished stone, its elaborate engraving seeming to shift and move in the dancing light. The High Elder and several other council members were present, along with Zethron and a handful of witnesses. Nixari stood at Tessa's side, her presence both comforting and nerve-wracking. The final trial, the High Elder intoned, is the most sacred of our traditions. By touching the blade, you will join your essence with that of House Soros. If you are found worthy, you will emerge with the knowledge and wisdom of our ancestors. If not... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Tessa approached the altar, her heart pounding. The blade seemed to pulse with inner light, as if sensing her approach. She looked back at Nixari, who nodded encouragingly. Together, Nixari said softly. We'll face this together. Tessa placed her hand on the blade's hilt. The world exploded into light and memory. She was Theron Val Soros, leading troops into battle, feeling the weight of command and the love for his people. She was Nixari's grandmother, negotiating a crucial alliance with steady hands and sharp wit. She was a dozen different ancestors, each adding their knowledge and experience to her consciousness. And then she was Nixari herself, feeling the crushing weight of responsibility as her house crumbled around her. The desperation of the duel with Zethron. The moment of shock when a strange human interfered. The growing realization that this accident might be exactly what her house needed. The growing feelings for the human who had stumbled into her life and changed everything. Tessa experienced Nixari's memories of their recent days together, the admiration for her quick learning, the respect for her courage, the dawning affection that she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. She felt Nixari's fear of losing her, her hope that their bond might become something real. And through it all, she remained herself. The memories and emotions flowed through her, but they didn't overwhelm her. She was Tessa Reardon, human, spacer, accidental bride to an alien noble. And she was exactly where she belonged. The visions faded, and she found herself back in the chamber, still holding the blade. But something had changed. The weapon no longer felt foreign in her hand, it felt like an extension of herself. "It is done," the High Elder said, her voice filled with wonder. "The blade has accepted her fully. She is worthy." Zethron stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "This proves nothing. The trials are meaningless if any outsider can pass them." "The trials are ancient and sacred," the High Elder replied coldly. "Would you question the wisdom of our ancestors?" Zethron's 4 eyes narrowed. "I question the wisdom of diluting our bloodlines with alien influences." "But very well, she has passed your trials. That doesn't mean she can protect what she's claimed." He turned to Tessa, his massive frame radiating menace. "I invoke the right of challenge. Face me in single combat, human, and prove your worth as a true house leader." "That's not part of the trials," Nixari protested. "It's ancient law," Zethron countered. "Any house leader can be challenged at any time. Unless your bondmate is too weak to accept." Tessa looked at the blade in her hand, feeling the weight of ancestral knowledge. She understood now what Nixari had meant about the blade choosing her. It wasn't just about genetic compatibility, it was about recognizing someone who would fight for what they believed in, who would protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "I accept your challenge, Zethron," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But not here, not now. Give me 1 day to prepare, and I'll face you at sunrise in the arena." "You're making a mistake," Nixari whispered as the crowd began to disperse. "Maybe," Tessa replied, still staring at the blade. "But it's my mistake to make. Besides, I've learned something important today." "What's that?" Tessa looked up at her, seeing her fully for the first time, not as an alien noble or a political necessity, but as the woman she was falling in love with. "I learned that some things are worth fighting for. And some people are worth dying for." Nixari's eyes widened, but before she could respond, Tessa continued. "I also learned that I don't want to die. I want to live, here, with you. I want to rebuild your house and make it strong again. I want to see what we can become together. Even if it means staying on a world that isn't your own. Living a life you never chose." Tessa smiled, reaching out to cup Nixari's face in her free hand. "I think I'm finally ready to choose it. All of it. The question is, are you ready to choose me? Not because the blade decided, but because you want to." Nixari's answer was wordless but unmistakable. She leaned into Tessa's touch, her eyes closing as if she was savoring the contact. "Yes," she whispered. "I choose you, Tessa Reardon. I choose us." As the last of the sunset light faded from the chamber, they stood together, the blade between them glowing softly in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring another battle, another test of worthiness. But tonight, they had each other, and the certain knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The blade had chosen Tessa, but she had chosen Nixari. And in that choice, both had found something neither had dared hope for, a love that transcended worlds, species, and the ancient laws that had brought them together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since arriving on this alien world, Tessa felt truly at home. The end. In the final confrontation with Zethron, Tessa would prove herself not just as a warrior, but as a leader worthy of standing beside Nixari as they forge a new future for House Soros. Their love, born from accident but nurtured by choice, would become the foundation for rebuilding what was lost and creating something even stronger, a bond that spans the stars themselves.